What's good? It's If Found, and today we got project breakdown number 3. For today, we're going to be breaking down my Still Alive remix. Real quick, if you're watching on YouTube, this is a shorter, more edited version, so it's not the full breakdown. But if you want to check out the full breakdown where I cover the second drop and the entire song, make sure to head over to my Patreon where I go through all the details of everything, basically. For this one, I'm going to keep it pretty linear, so we're going to start in with the intro and then move on, chronologically through the song. So the intro is pretty simple, and here are all my stems down here. So these are the stems from the original song. Cadmium sent me these stems. So the original is dope, really like it, and then I just pulled the vocals straight from those. Anyways, for the intro, it starts off like this. So I kept the structure for the front half of the song pretty identical to what Cadmium did and what the original song was, mainly because I really liked how it let it breathe and I wanted something a little bit more spooky, somber sounding. So I did actually, this original melody loop, I think it was like from a splice loop that I found, but then I converted it to MIDI and changed a couple things in the MIDI. But that splice loop gave me a lot of inspiration for the type of vibe I wanted for the remix, so I decided to run with it and basically just pulled the MIDI loop, which is this right here actually. And what you can do is in Ableton, which you can do this in other DAWs as well, but just kind of pull the MIDI loop straight into a MIDI track, or sorry, the loop straight into a MIDI track. And let's do harmony because it's polyphonic. This is what it gave us. Obviously, it's not what I ended up with, so I went in and cleaned the MIDI up, changed a few notes to fit the vibe that I wanted. So this sound itself is pretty simple. It's two, or just one sound really, but Massive X preset. And if we take everything off, and then just started adding some effects, more saturation, compression. And this right here, this lossy plugin is kind of like it basically lowers the bit rate, but you can use it as like a cheap reverb sound, which I really like the sound of. So I just did Supermarket 3 AM. It feels very like spacious and eerie, but kind of like a low res reverb. This Magic BM preset is one of my favorites. You can just use the macros here to dial it in. Doesn't do much. It's real subtle, but it just kind of gives it a little bit more depth to the sound, and then also compresses it a bit so it feels a little bit fatter. Basically just doing some EQ and a little bit of OTT. And then just bring the volume up. I got a few more things going on here, but these are more for like automation. So I kind of wash it out here, and that's just with a room reverb essentially that I'm just washing that out with. A filter, just filtering down. So that little flutter I was talking about is not from the Massive plugin. This is actually something I just added in Shaperbox. Without it. So I thought it was a really cool, I don't know, it just gives it nice depth. And then some more stuff starts to come in. This is, again, so this is where I got that MIDI loop from. And this is what inspired me to do that flutter, right? It's built into the MIDI loop, or the melody loop. So this is what I then, converted to MIDI. Got this little guy, which doesn't do much, I don't think. I think it comes in later. So yeah, that comes in later. And this just starts to kind of fade in. And this is just a granular, I think this might have been a preset from Granulator 2. Then I just did some saturation and stuff on. but all together on that one. Here it just kind of adds a little bit more texture, a little bit more kind of ambience. And then for the verse stuff, we actually have this stuff is muted, but some stuff I used to have in there that I ended up taking out. The bass layer of that same MIDI. So I basically just took this and then just, you know, wrote my own bass line here based on that MIDI, but with everything. So that's a cool little thing. And then we have this little Hoover sound. I don't know where I did this. I think because it's balanced to audio, obviously. I'm pretty sure this was from a Massive X plugin or instance. It was like it was like a Massive X preset. It was a Hoover bass that I just, and it's a pretty standard Hoover bass, but then washed out with reverb and probably a little bit of saturation, and that's what we get here. Without the vocals. And then we have some basic effects. So this little like trap, Kill Bill siren. And so this was one of the, not one of the first songs where I started experimenting more with the trap sound, but definitely one of the first ones that I put out where I was experimenting with it. And so I wanted to definitely signal that that was the type of vibe that I'm switching to, like, towards as an artist. Because before I was doing, you know, all this melodic bass and like dubstep and shit like that. And I wanted this to feel like a clear departure from that. We got just some more ambience here. Pretty simple stuff. The riff essentially just gives it like some breakup. Kind of gives that crunchy texture. And here's what that looks like. Crushed Amber is a preset. I don't know how much I changed from this preset, to be honest, but it sounds great. This is a TikTok thing that I found like years ago. It was like some random TikTok where a girl's like singing in the woods, like on the side of a road or something, and I just really liked how it sounded, so I sampled it and I've just kept it ever since. And I just use it occasionally. In this case, it's stretched, really stretched out, so it sounds different, but yeah, just kind of another nice little ambient thing there. And then again, we're gonna focus on the vocals a little bit later, and there's not much I'm doing anyways, so there's not much to look at there on the vocals. So now going into the pre here, drums start to kick in. We've got this kind of heavily saturated kick here, which looks to be this virtual right kick. Just do, again, this is basically like a saturator. I don't really use this plugin anymore. Some crazy EQ curves here, but you can hear how the tone, a little more subdued, fits better in the mix. Yeah, it just kind of pops out too much. Like I don't really want that to be so crazy and in your face. It's supposed to be more subtle. An effect rack, and this is just to give it some more analog texture. So Sound Toys makes like basically an effect wrapper or rack where you can put a bunch of their almost like a channel strip where you can put a bunch of their effects in one VST and then control them from there. And what's cool, the reason why I like this so much, I don't use this as much anymore because it's very CPU intensive, but they have presets, and the presets are just great. They're great for just like adding a little bit of analog character to a sound and not have to like worry about tweaking a bunch. So like it's subtle, and you can probably hear it more when I have something like this. Just a little squeeze. The Devil Lock is doing a lot of that. Filter Freak is giving it a little bit more modulation in the low mid, so it just feels a little bit more like an analog, like emulation. And then some decap to kind of push it a bit more. And then I've got that Stomp Kick, which is just a tiny end sample. And then the different. So there's just some loops here. This is from Liz Deck. Some great break loop and like top loops that I use a lot. And then we got this guy, which so basically is like a techno loop that I like the little growly thing. So I thought it was cool. So I just basically filtered that out to get just that part. Kind of like a nice little effect. And then hearing, I remember how I actually did this. So this was done first, adding the thing, and I was like, okay, that kind of makes me feel like I want to hear a Hoover in there as well. So then I added the Hoover. I feel like they just kind of complemented each other nicely for upping the energy in the section, right? And then we've got some risers that start coming in. So this is back when I was stacking a lot of risers. I still will do this sometimes, but now I'm opting more for trying to use as few layers as possible just to clean up the mix and get things moving faster. So cool little transition there. And then we get into the build where I start introducing the lead, the drop lead, right? And for the drop lead, there we go. This main lead, I use it a lot in a lot of songs. It's essentially just a serum patch. It's a saw, I think with a square, a little bit of a square, modulated, and a little bit of FM modulation between the two. And then just saturated to hell. Basically, that's all it is. A very simple sound, just a lot of saturation. Got that Valhalla reverb is giving it that spaced out room feel. And you'll see how it kind of comes in here. And those turn off. So let's see if it'll let me show you, but the main reason this sounds like expressive is because of these pitch bends I'm doing. So I just go to MIDI control pitch bend, and then I'm setting my pitch bend range to plus or minus 24 in the synth, so in Serum. Which I could just show you that real quick. So there's actually two Serum patches, but I'm pretty sure it's, yeah, so I'm just using the second one here. And like I said, square, saw, a little bit of a sub thing to give it some subharmonic, like, or what's it called, intermodal distortion, negative 24 24, and then so that's the pitch bend range. That's pretty much it for that sound. Nothing crazy. But then we have, so the drop itself is structured. So here's where we have the drop. Put the vocals back. And then it pretty much repeats just at a lower octave. So for the drop, we've got a call and response structure. This is the call. And then here's the response. And so, yeah, here's that lead for the call. And then the lead for the response, we have this guy here. So pretty much just like trappy, stabby sound, which is a couple of different layers. That's our main layer. And then this is probably a preset from something. Yeah, so it's a preset from Fabian Mazur's pack. And that's pretty much that. I've got this external instrument, which is then going to, so this is where it gets a little weird. It's sending to trap lead, but to this shaper box. Where is it? The shaper box here. And it's basically just, so if I listen to this, just listen. So that's the space there, right? If I take it off. But that shaper box is basically like a sidechain compressor. I'm taking down the initial transient, which is triggered by the MIDI from the thing itself. And then it's ducking that out. It's allowing the transient to go through, so it keeps the transient really clean. It's not muddied up by the reverb tail. A little bit of EQ to shape it. I'm pushing this really hot. I've got this fifth harm. I'm not really doing anything here, I don't think. Yeah, there's a little bit of push. I'm basically just like pushing a little bit of EQ here, and that's about it. Nothing insane. Just to accentuate some of the harmonics. I originally had a limiter in this little like limiter. It's like another limiter thing that I had on, but I decided to bypass it so it can just send straight through. Just thought it sounded cooler. A little more clipped sounding. And this is just a sample from a Cymatics pack. But I just copied that tail over, stuttered it, a little bit of trash. So just giving it a little more texture. Again, this drop is really hot, like it's supposed to sound really distorted, so. So I wanted everything to be really, really loud and distorted. Without this vocal, I want this vocal to be clean. Okay. It's kind of cool. It's like really distorted and this clean vocal cuts through. So that's that. I've got the background synth. So with the full drop, your leads kind of sound like this. This is mainly the melodic sound. So a couple things to help fill this drop out, because the leads take up a big portion of the spectrum, right? But there's a couple of things you can do to kind of help make it feel a little more professional. One is this little donk thing. Basically, it's like, I mean, in this case, I'm using a horn. No, I'm not using the horns tab. I'm just using this guy, which is like it might be a preset. Yeah, it's like a preset. I just modified to get the tone right, and then pushed it some saturation EQ. And that just hits pretty much when all the kicks hit. So it's just like a on. So kind of like a cool little thing. And then we got that little thing, which is like another layer. And we'll have it play here and there, right? So with the drop, if you want to make it a little more professional sounding, I highly recommend doing some filler sounds. It'll help kind of it'll help kind of fill up the spectrum, but also make it feel a little bit more like full, a little bit more well-rounded. And this is, so in the past, people used to do this with just adding white noise layers, especially in future bass and stuff like that. You'd have your main leads and your bass, and then you just have just a white noise layer to fill everything else out. I found that it's pretty dated sounding to do that. It still works, and there are people who still do it, but I like to opt for more harmonic fillers now, so things that kind of like are in tune and the harmonics are in line with everything you're doing in the drop. Also that are a little bit rhythmic. So I've got this like crazy screech, right? But it's harmonically in tune with the drop. So it's kind of a cool little thing. And then we've got basically just this like laser stab to help layer in with the main lead, and then this little sustain sound with another little screech, some texture, this kind of like rhythm sounding crystal bell thing, and then something to layer with that bell, and then all together it kind of sounds like this, right? But without it. So you can hear how it kind of fills out the drop a little bit more. And it's pretty much the same. All we're doing is moving down in the octave for the main lead, and then moving up, I think it was a fifth. Actually, it's an octave up for that B lead, for the response lead, right? That's pretty much it. The filler stuff is the same. Looking at the vocals, we've got these little chops, which are like shouts. And I'm just doing this little flutter with this auto pan. Just kind of make it a little bit more interesting, right? So it's not just a basic shout.
I've got the heat.
And then for the response, doing different shouts.
Okay.
So there's that. And then just a couple little vocal shouts here and there, right? Like this guy here.
Okay.
Just to keep it kind of nice and hype. And we got Micah coming back in strong there. That's pretty much it. I mean, it's the same in the second half of the drop. Now for the drums, let's look at that. These are the main sounds. So I got this kick, this trap kick, which I made back at the end of 2023. It's pretty heavily sent. Honestly, now I wouldn't have distorted it this much because it's pretty rolled over. But it works. I mean, it sounds cool. Second effect track giving me a little bit of space with the super plate. Without. So just a little more blown out sounding, which kind of works for this drop. This is our trap snare, which I think I've shown in previous breakdown videos, but this trap snare is a one that I made. So it's basically, this is the main sound right here. Is that guy. Made it in Vital, and this is basically all the settings. And this is basically all the settings, so it's pretty simple, straightforward. Yeah, a little trap snare with a little tone in it, and then I added this on top. And there it is. That's the trap snare. In terms of processing, got for the actual custom snare, I think I've shown this before, so I'm not going to go through fully it, but little trash 2 glue compressor, big clipper. And then for that tone on top, another trash, and then a big clipper. And then this is just ducking out the transient part of that tone so that it allows the main snare to kick through the main transient of the snare. So that's it. And then we've got some like off snares. Well, actually that's a clap, but right here is the snare, I believe. And then for this, pretty basic clap. I have this little pink noise layer, which is kind of giving it some, it's kind of like noisy tail. Pretty cool. And then this is just a trap snare. This is a decap snare, nothing crazy. Little bits of processing on it, but nothing insane. So there's that. Take this out. So helps it pop out a little bit more at you. But yeah, cool snare sound. The top loops on this are pretty straightforward. So I've got this Lizdec loop, which I think is similar to what was going on in the verse, just a little bit more like refined. And then what I'm doing here, I've just got my classic Allison hat 2 and a barely alive closed hat. And then it speeds up on this part. Pretty straightforward. And then I've got this little think break with some processing. Basically just some saturation. I don't even think this is doing anything. Yeah, it's like barely doing anything, so that's kind of like not worth anything. The Saturn 2 and then some fresh hair and stab. Stab is that transient designer. So that's pretty much it for the drop. It's pretty basic. I mean, most of it is carried out in that lead. I wanted the lead to be front and center, so I didn't really put much else in there to distract it. And then you have this crazy vocal. You know, Mike is insane, so you gotta let that shine when it comes through. That's exactly what I did. I just went completely silent on everything else and let that shine. For the vocal processing itself, Cadmium, the original artist, and Micah did a great job with it. I didn't really want to do too much to touch it. So I've got a little vocal effects rack where I'm just kind of giving it my own reverb and delay that I wanted to. I've got a little bit of EQ, nothing much. Nothing crazy, just to give it a little bit more presence, a little bit more shine. I feel like it fit better with my mix. And then a little bit of de-essing. Another de-esser just for good measure. I think this is around the 2K area. Yeah, just to tame some of those harsher frequencies. And then I'm just pushing it through a God particle. Basically acting as a limiter, just giving some more loudness out of the vocal. That's pretty much it for the vocals. I'm doing this is during the build here. And then I'm just creating that riser, that pitch riser with a frequency shifter. I prefer to use frequency shifters for this as opposed to pitch. I just think it sounds cooler. You have all the spectral effects and side effects and all that come out of it. So that's it for the drop. Let's move on to verse 2. We've got this little break here where I introduce the lead sound that I'm using in the second verse. Alright, so that'll do it for the breakdown for Still Alive. If you have any other questions about anything particular in the song that I didn't cover, let me know and I'll try to talk about it in the comments of the YouTube video. My artist Patreon members will be getting this full project, everything in here, all packaged for you, all the samples, synths, presets, all that kind of stuff, all packaged in here. So if you are an artist member on my Patreon, you get that. And for all my Patreon members, thank you for all your continued support. It means the world to me, helps me a lot for buying snacks. And I'm glad I get to help some of you along on your production journey. So that does it for me. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.